Hello, I'm Dr. Larry Carnes, and welcome to Spotlight TV. We're honored to have our special guest with us again today, Miss Beatrice Cayzer, and she's going to be speaking about a powerful book that she's written. Hello, Miss Cayzer, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Can I show you the cover of the book? This is one cover.
Yes, please.
But we now have a new cover for the same book with the three Kennedys on the cover, about whom I wrote a great deal. The book is in two parts. The first is recounted by a Hungarian-American chap who was about 22 years old, same age as Jack Kennedy was when we were writing about him, because he was a young man and not the man we know as president. He was flighty, except when he was in England during the war. He was seen by a man who also worked for me, actually with a broom, cleaning up the rubbish on the sidewalk. Nobody else can tell you that. I can tell you that because he wrote to me when he had been in London and seen Jack cleaning up after a bombing. So he had two sides of him even then. The flighty side, where the girls, and the one who wanted to be a serious writer, who wrote Profiles in Courage, won the Pulitzer Prize for it, wanted to continue as a writer, but no. Father Joseph Kennedy Sr. had other plans, particularly after Jack became a hero in the far Pacific, saving 13 men when his PT boat was sliced in two by a Japanese destroyer, and he helped them swim to an island, pulling one man with his teeth who couldn't swim.
My goodness.
So he was a big hero, and Time magazine had him on the cover and all that sort of thing. Bob made sure that happened. And meanwhile, his elder brother, Joe Jr., who had always been the great guy in the family, he felt very left out of things, and that he had to show himself to be a greater hero than his younger brother, Jack. And so he took off in a plane that was overloaded with bombs, the idea being that he would jump off the plane, parachuting, and his navigator too, when they were in sight of a big bomb-making factory in Normandy, France, which was occupied by the Nazis, where they were making the buzz bombs for London, and they would be safe, landing probably in the channel where they'd be scooped up. But the plane with all the bombs would go into the factory and destroy it. Well, it blew up before it ever hit the factory and killed Joe Jr. So that was the end of Joe Jr. wanting to be a great hero. Hardly anybody even knew why he had died. That's why he died. And he was brave, and he was brilliant, and he was the star of the family. But he's gone. So now it's Jack not to be a writer, not to go out west and live on a ranch and just write his books like he wanted to do. Now he's the one who's got to be president. Yes. And he's got to do everything that Dad says, not to go out with this lady who's had 2 divorces, not to go out with the other one who's still got a husband and 1 divorce, and toe the line, have a Catholic girl of a good family that he would marry and be suitable as First Lady of the United States. And of course, Jack was not going out with ladies who were appropriate to be First Lady of the United States. He was going out with the wild ones. Now, my book, Kennedy's in Love.
Yes.
The Hungarian-American guy, Mark Esterhazy, who writes the stuff, tells about how he went out with an old friend of his. He knew Jack, used to see him in church. And he had divided feelings because he'd watch him trying to pick up 14-year-old girls at church, misbehaving generally. And yet, when he got to a castle in Ireland, which is the one which is shown on this cover, not the most appropriate book, which has the 3 young Kennedys in London, very good friends. That's the 3 that I write about in this book. There are 9 children by Rose and Joseph Kennedy Sr. But this book only deals with 4. The 3 who fall in love and their unhappy, very badly treated sister Rosemary that I went to school with. She was 19, I was 9. And oh, I thought she was wonderful, the best basketball player in the school. But her father was afraid she'd get pregnant or worse, get some disease or something, because she'd pick up men off the street in London, also in America. So he had heard about something called a lobotomy, and he thought that would control his daughter, and then these things wouldn't happen anymore. But what happened was the daughter had the lobotomy, and she was reduced to being like a 3-year-old child. It was terrible. The girl I so admired in school was like a kindergarten child now, and stuck away with some nuns where nobody ever saw her. Only her mother and her sister Eunice ever went to bother to go see her.
Okay.
Yeah, but I can answer some of your questions.
Well, it looks like you had quite an extensive relationship with the Kennedys.
Well, I have lived for 52 years on County Road, and they lived for about 30 or 40 years on North County Road. That's not such a big distance. And I saw them swimming, I saw them dancing, I saw them around Palm Beach. I never dated Jack Kennedy. I was too young in a way. When I heard such things about him, I wouldn't think of having had a date with him.
Wow.
I saved myself from my husband.
You talked about him sweeping and doing things of that nature. You talked about him being a hero and swimming and pulling someone with his teeth. Now that's amazing. Tell us a little bit more about that. Swimming to shore and pulling someone with his teeth.
Well, the other man was badly injured from the ship going through their ship, the destroyer going through the PT-119. And so Jack was the best swimmer there. All the Kennedys are good swimmers because of the house up here on North Ocean Boulevard, right on the water. They swam there every day, including Rosemary, who was stuck away. She loved swimming too. Well, up in Massachusetts, they also went swimming, but what they did, which was very useful in the Pacific theater of war, was they loved to go sailing.
Yes.
And they knew very well how to handle small boats, which is what exactly he was doing as head of his PT boat. With, I think there were 14. Immediately 3 were killed when the destroyer went through, but then he had to save the remainder. For some hours they stayed on a little bit of the boat that was floating, but eventually they would have to swim somewhere where they could get water and rest and whatnot. So they did swim for many hours, but there was the one guy who was badly injured and wasn't a swimmer anyhow, and Jack somehow belted him up, put the belt thing in his mouth, and towed this man for several hours.
Okay.
Now you try that sometime and don't let the salt water go down. Very wonderful. So he was a hero.
That's
Then,
right.
when he got to one of the islands, he carved a coconut. Kennedy, 11 alive, please collect, or whatever the words were. And he kept that coconut when it was brought to him by a British wonderful spotter that they had on a little island. And he took them back to their base. And by then, Kennedy had got himself very badly bitten by malarial mosquitoes. He had malaria. His usual Addison's disease, of which he had suffered for many years, was in bad control because he'd had no medicine. In fact, no decent food or water. But anyway, he did save his, and they were his, he was the head of the boat.
Okay.
They were his responsibility, and he took that responsibility. I think that showed a very good part, aside from the swimming and all that, that he realized he had to be responsible about something. When we had, and this is long after my book takes place, the crisis with the ships going for Havana, where they already had missiles to take these terrible bombs over to our country, he was a man of decision. And he said, you cross this line and we blast you out of the water. And they turned around and we got off the missile crisis because he did know how to be decisive in a crisis, which is a very useful thing in the middle of a war in the Pacific or in the White House.
I remember that. Speak to me, if you will. Now here comes his lovely wife, the First Lady. Speak to us a little bit in the time that we have left about how he met the First Lady. You talk about Kennedy Love, and then tell us a little bit about why you got that title for the book, Kennedy Love.
Well, because the 3, not the one who's slightly retarded, But the three eldest children of John Kennedy, Joseph Kennedy, and former ambassador to Britain, which he had to give up because he was pro-Nazi. Yeah, his children loved Britain. Now, they all died in a terrible way, all three of them. But on the way, they had enormous love affairs, enormous.
Okay.
Jack, with a Danish journalist, Inga Arvad, who unfortunately for her had accepted 3 luncheons from Adolf Hitler and was known to have represented the Nazi party in Denmark for journalists. Now, that was very bad. And J. Edgar Hoover got ahead of that. And when he found out, he certainly didn't want a young officer working in the intelligence corps of the Navy going out with this woman. And he had their bed springs tested so they could hear the bed springs moving around when they were making love, if you want to call it that.
Wow.
And wow is right. So they were trying to get rid of her in the most terrific way. Well, the way they actually got rid of her, and I feel it's a sad thing to say in the book, I don't quite dwell on it, he always passed on to someone else. He wasn't what you might call a loyal lovemaker.
That's important. Now listen, we have 2 minutes left. So share with us in the remaining time that we have left. Tell us how we can get in touch with you if people want to purchase your book. And it's just so powerful that what you've been sharing with us.
Well, thank you. I want to share one little bit more. You can buy the book through Amazon. You can ask your local bookseller or shop to order it. It's called Kennedy's in Love. There's 2 people who made it, writer's branding. The most recent that has the 3 young people on the cover, or this one, which is straight from the first publisher in Atlanta, Georgia. But please give me a chance to tell you something that I want to say. I wanted to start this program with what's on our dime, the lowest thing of our currency. It says, "In God we trust."
Yes.
It's the lowest thing of our trust. Well, I believe in God we trust. But then don't let God down. Love each other. Love and preserve the wonderful creatures God gave us. The eagle in the air, the whales and the tuna and what great fish that we have in the oceans, and the bees and other human fauna too.
Yes.
Very important. So I want to ask you, please, do love your people that you know and even those you don't know. Please take a chance to understand that certain of us have disappeared. We had herds of buffaloes here on our lands in America, in the northern part, certainly. They're all gone. They are gone. And people who used to live off the buffalo, they have been decimated also to very few Native Americans on reservations mostly.
Thank you so much. We have one.
In God we trust, okay?
Yes, in God we trust. That's so very powerful. And that's something that we need to carry with us. I tell you, it's been an honor and a pleasure to be with you again and to have you as our special guest. As always, you're so wonderful. And your hair is so lovely and your outfit is beautiful. We just enjoyed it. Thank you for sharing this history and this experience that you had with the Kennedys and giving us an opportunity just to get a little insight into who they were. We're so thankful that you would join us again. This is Dr. Larry Carnes. You've been watching Spotlight TV with our very special guest. This is Dr. Larry Carnes. Thank you for watching Spotlight TV.